URL. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone at home. I'm back from a parallel universe that they call moving. I think I'm back, and what's interesting is that I'm sharing this parallel universe with a few other of our members who are still in it, and if you're at home watching, there is an end, I promise you. Eventually, the pictures do get on the wall, new appliances come, and your life starts to unfold in a new way. So, this month's theme I've really enjoyed, pause for guidance. But I want to talk about a different kind of guidance today. So when you have ever sought guidance, either through prayer or through advice, you probably had a specific reason. You probably had a decision to make. Do I move? Do I get a different career? Do I do any number of things that if we, in a sense, I'm praying for guidance, and people who ask us to pray for them for guidance, they've got a decision to make. But there's a completely different track of guidance that I believe to pray for. That guidance that if you are, in a sense, grounded spiritually and emotionally, the right choices have a way of showing up, not on their own, but they seem to be clearer. That we turn this backwards a bit, that we sometimes can obsess about the choice without spending the time or seeking the guidance to do some inner housekeeping, to clean out those things that we've come to believe that aren't true, that keep us away from those really good choices. And interesting enough, I guess the more serious the choice, or at least as humans, that we judge it as, oh, this is a really important choice, that we go into such anxiety and even fear it sometimes. And, oh, please, everyone we talk to, please pray for guidance for me. This is just, I've got to make the right decision, as opposed to doing some of the inner work that would calm us down. Years ago, I had a friend, really loud this morning, so I'm moving this way. I had a friend that says, I'm really working on praying to hand it over to Spirit, hand it over to God. I said, well, that's great. Is it working out for you? He says, yeah. He says, but that really important things, I really hold on because maybe he doesn't have time. And so he says, yeah, so I've really got to make this decision. So if I just let it go, maybe he'll be spending time on something else, but I really have to give a vigil here. And of course, those were the things that didn't work out as well for him, or at least not as easily, that I suspect if he was able to give kind of the, okay, let's hand it over, not to say that you sit on your couch and eat potato chips and just let it happen on its own. I mean, you do have to do things, but it's what is the inner housekeeping, what is the guidance you've sought to set a good foundation. So this week, as I was pondering this, I reacquainted myself with an old friend, author-wise, and you'll know, and I'll tell you in a little bit why, Louise Hay, who wrote You Can Heal Your Life and many other things. And everyone kind of familiar with her? So she's a great hero to have. So for so many things, we could probably just talk all day about her, and we won't. But I did review her book, again, You Can Heal Your Life, and I relate to her in a sense that read a story about her this week, or reread a story, that she came into that latter part of her experience in life that we all think of her, in her late 50s, about 60. And the sense that, I think it was on like her 60th birthday, that there were decades of work ahead for her. And I kind of relate to that, because even at the age that I am now, I have a sense that the really good stuff is yet to come, that I'm really like ramping up. And that's the way that it was for her. And she was a minister within Science of Mind, and teaching Science of Mind, meaning that we can do some inner house cleaning and literally heal our life. But here's the reason why she came back to me again, thinking about our journey here, the journey of guidance in our lives. I think I brought this a few years ago. A friend of mine sent me a picture of her and him shortly after she had died. And she was about 90-ish, something like that. She was timeless, one of those timeless beings, 90-ish. And this colleague of mine, he became not only colleagues with her, working with her, but became truly good friends. And I think she became more of like a surrogate mother-grandmother for him, and it was really a sweet relationship. And he sent out this picture, again, shortly after she had passed, and someone had taken it of the two of them without their knowledge, that they were simply crossing the street, and this was from behind, and they were holding hands, like you might any other 90-year-old relative. And the quote that was sent with the picture was from Ram Dass saying, "We are just walking each other home." And I just thought that was so sweet, that she had done that big chunk of work in her life, and she was 90-ish and, in her last days. And literally, as he was crossing the street, she, in a sense, walking each other home. Again, that is another level of guidance that I was thinking about this week, that we get so bent out of shape of what should I do? What are other people thinking? They have a different opinion than I do, so they must be wrong and absolutely have lost their mind in some way. And when you get down to it, if we look at our guidance to reevaluate and look at, in a sense, we are just walking each other home. And when we get to whatever that home is at different times, some of us may be decades in the future, maybe some of us next week, but we're in a sense all doing that and looking at, okay, how can I be guided in a sense to make more of the journey and just relax with it a little bit and to ask myself, what is really important? Now, I think we ask and answer that question often. And we may have our pat answers of what we say is important to us. And it may be things like family or certain types of relationships, but you have to ask yourself the question, even though you say that is important, do you follow up with it? And this is how you can test yourself. What do you most rent out space in your brain with? So you may say family is most important. Are you thinking loving thoughts about your family most of the time? Or are you throwing your shoe at the television set when a certain political figure comes on? I mean, think about it. Or are you just embroiled in inner conversations about this and they believe that, or that I don't believe in it, and all that. So in a sense, that if you are one of those, because we all are to a certain extent, but if you've tipped the scale, and if that's where you are most of the time, you have made that the most important thing. You may not think it's the most important thing, but that's the programming that is going on 24/7 possibly in your brain. So the process of seeking guidance is not, for me, saying, what should I do? But please assist me and help to clear this brain out, to actually put in there what I know is most important, and the quality of relationships, and respecting others as they respect ourselves, and knowing that there is a larger life of oneness here that we all share if we allow ourselves to share it. So ask yourself, is there a discrepancy with what you say is important and what you give space for in your head? And it's not something you can ask like instantaneously so much. But as you're seeking guidance, to look for that. So here's the question. So what is truly important? And if there are things lurking up there that really aren't, how are we going to clear them out? So years ago, in one of the many classes I've taken and given, said, it's one large class at this point. I don't really know even where the dividing lines are on the different classes and things that I've both taken and facilitated. I was recalling there was a guided visualization that a teacher gave years ago. I can't even remember. Again, I don't know what class it was. And the point of it, in a sense, was to come to the idea of what do you hold important, or what have you held important in different portions of your life, what do you do now, and what do you project in the future would be important. And maybe some of you went through this, because it's one of our classes somewhere, but basically in this visualization, they started at infancy and said, have you visualize what it felt like to be an infant? And I don't remember all the verbiage that went with it. What did it feel like, and what was important to you? And then it went in 10-year increments. Then it would take you to 10. and then to 20, 30, 40, and beyond. And again, what does that feel like being that person? Again, if it's in the past, what was important to you? And then, of course, at a certain point in that visualization, depending on your age, it was no longer something in the past, it was something in the future. So you had to, in a sense, project, say, 20 years in the future of what will it feel like, what is important to you. And I thought a bit about this exercise this week and how I reacted at the time that I was brought through that visualization, and how it really is a deeper process than I gave it credit for at that time. So at the time, I think I was in my mid-30s. I think so, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And looking back to like my 20-year-old self person of what was important to me at that time, seemed like the most important thing was financial security and pulling my life together and going on the right path at the university so I could have more financial security. And that's an important thing, actually. It is important to have financial security. But as I looked at that, if I look back now, there was the things that were in the way. The things that I took along the way that I allowed to be barriers. Again, we call them in Science of Mind teaching false beliefs about ourselves. That if we believe that we're not capable or lovable or worthy of something, it doesn't matter how many classes you go to, you're not going to get there. It's always that thing, that stumbling block. And so what was really important as I look back now was not my desire for financial security, but what was important was to really delve in what was keeping me away from having a more balanced spiritual and emotional life. And as I looked at this even further, it's interesting. So you start in this visualization as a baby, and then your next stop is at 10. And just think about that. I'm not asking you to go through this whole process. And in a sense, as a baby, we're kind of making it up a little bit. But I think of being an infant very much like at the very end of our life, as we're going through the dying process. And this is how I think of it. And I have no evidence that it's true, but I choose to believe that it's true. I have found that people, as they are in their last days, especially if they're in and out of consciousness, that it seems like they're trying out their next gig on for size a little bit. It seems like they're kind of like in two places at once. And if you've ever had a relative say, oh, I talked to Aunt Sarah last night, and you go, oh, she's really hallucinating. Maybe not. I think they're trying it out for size. And I think we do the same thing as an infant. I think we're not fully here yet. I think we know our perfection in a way that we have that memory of what we came from. Again, no proof, just kind of what I believe or think could be true, or kind of nice if it would be true. So that's what I talk about and what I believe. So, but something happens from that sense of a infinite where you are fully immersed into the oneness of the divine. Something happens from there from when you're 10. We start to take things on. We start to take ideas on that aren't true. And I was reminded, even for me, and I have something from Louise Hayes here that she talks about that. But I remember the first time in first grade when a teacher told me I wasn't good enough. And I'm sure people told me that before, but it was the first time that it stuck. It was the first time I was like, what? What do you mean? I mean, I remember as a 7-year-old, it was kind of shocking. And I could see how it was a seed to a lot of insecurities that grew. Something so simple. Again, that maybe if it was said to someone else that they wouldn't have been in the frame of mind to even accept it. But I really saw that as a moment of planting a seed that would grow in a way that's not so good. And Louise says here, babies do not have to do anything to become perfect. They already are perfect. And they act as if they know it. They know they are at the center of the universe. They are not afraid to ask for what they want. They freely express their emotions. You know when a baby is hungry. In fact, the whole neighborhood knows. You also know when babies are happy, for their smiles light up a room. They are full of love. She goes on to say, so how did we go from being a tiny baby who knows the perfection of itself and of life to being a person who has problems and feels unworthy and unlovable to one degree or another? It starts to happen then. So as we are looking for guidance to what our journey should be about as we're walking each other home, the key is we knew it already. So how do we remember that? How do we get to the actual truth? And she went on to say, talking about ideas that we've come to believe that aren't true, she says, is it true for me now? When did that belief come from? Do I still believe it because a first grade teacher told me that over and over? And would I be better off if I dropped that belief? It's not a trick question. The answer is actually yes. Yeah, I ruined it for everybody. You were going to go home. What's the answer to that question? Actually, yes. So the wonderful thing about Louise Hay's work is the simplicity of that. I've come to believe a certain thing about myself. It has clouded my journey. It's gotten in the way of really the choices and guidance that I seek. And maybe now would be a good time to start the process of letting it go. And I realize that it's very simple, but not always easy. That I know a lot of people, including myself, knowing exactly in detail what they are carrying, and at the same time have trouble unloading it. So for me, that's where the prayer for guidance comes in. If we are truly seeking a better journey, that our prayers around guidance should be, show me the way. How do I unload this that I came possession of? And part of that Louise talks about in this portion of the book, something we all know that we should do, and we all have trouble with it, of forgiveness. And I just think, that poor first grade teacher of mine that thought it was okay to tell children that they weren't good enough. And I think, gosh, what pain did she carry around? Of course, she was wearing one of those old nun habits from the 60s and had a thing. Now, she was miserable, obviously. But I just think of it, rather than think badly of her, I think, God, what was she carrying? What pain did someone put onto her that she almost didn't seem to have any other choice but to try to unload it on someone else? So the guidance is, how do I do that? Again, not excusing bad behavior, but how do I have compassion for people that helped load me up with some of this stuff? And I think that's really what is calling us now as a spiritual community. This is a time of year that we go into our stewardship program. And our stewardship program is about a lot more things than our finances. Finances are important. We all look at how do we share in our financial obligation here. But as we lead up to this, we very mindfully ask the question, well, why should we do this another year? That's always a good question. How does Spirit want to show up as who we are? And some of us came together, the Leadership Council, as well as most of our prayer practitioners, and Reverend Jill is so skilled at leading this kind of visualization that we call visioning, of, as opposed to, we're so used as Westerners in prayer telling God what we want, envisioning, we're saying, well, you choose. How do you want to show up through us? You tell us. We'll do it. It's interesting what came through this year. So when you do visioning for communities, there's different ways that it shows up at different times in life and what's going on in the world. And there's been times in our community as well as other communities that was time to do left brain things, build a certain program. Remember one year it was turn the garage into a social hall. It was like concrete things. And we love to get our arms around concrete things because they seem to make sense, don't they? Yes, of course we need a social hall. Reverend John doesn't need a place to park his car anymore. Get a social hall. And there was years for that. And this year it was, especially with what's going in the world, and I think not only the pandemic, but I think the pain that is going on in our communities right now, the divisiveness that's going on in our communities right now, the judgment to anyone who has a different opinion, the pain that goes around that. And it's not just happening out there, it's happening here too. And the thing that we were led to was, I have it right here, a heart-centered community with the words emphasis on connection, unity, and celebration. And all of you should be getting little invitations with all this on it. This desire to be together and share. This desire to celebrate each other. And not just filling up our social calendar. Oh yeah, it's a potluck every Friday. It's not about that. Anything from the potluck on Friday to community service things that we can do together. Things that are also significant as well as social. And I think what was calling us on this is this realization that we're all being called to heal our life in some way. Again, what space have you been renting in your head? What judgments have you been making about community members? And when you really think about it, what pain has those judgments that you've made caused you? It all boomerangs. I mean, really think about that. What pain has that truly caused you when all this crazy stuff that's been going on in the world right now? So I believe we're being called as a community, as Louise Hayes say, you can heal your life. You can heal your community. You can rise to something higher, and the world still may seem to has lost its mind. And we're still not through completely the pandemic. And we can still have a heart-centered community. We can still express love and admiration and respect for each other. And we can celebrate each other at the same time. That's what's up for us this year. And I think it's really important. So you'll be hearing more about this, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. That is the work that we're here to do this year. And I want to close today with a prayer written by Louise Hayes. Very simple. She says, in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I believe in a power far greater than I am that flows through me every moment of every day. I open myself to the wisdom within, knowing that there is only one intelligence in the universe. Out of this one intelligence comes all the answers, all the solutions, all the healings, all the new creations. I trust this power and intelligence, knowing that whatever I need to know is revealed to me, and that whatever I need comes to me in the right time, space, and sequence. All is well in the world. Let's just close our eyes for a moment and just let that settle. And so it is.